Well, this is a little relief. These are all quite small, and pieces of hardboard stuck on other pieces of hardboard. And I start really just by sticking the bits on and then trying to make something of it. And I find that I like doing these little reliefs, and I find that by just having these defined shapes, it disciplines you, and you've got to try and make something of it, which is intriguing. These are all little reliefs. They're all quite small.
Breon,
Yeah.
when did you know that your life would be that of an artist?
I think when I was about 12, I did a little drawing of men at work, and my parents framed it for me with a little bit of what we call passepartout around it. And when I saw that frame, I knew I was going to be an artist. This is another little that was supposed to be Halley's Comet at the bottom there, you see, but it's just changed into a shape. Now this is a painting now, and these, in a way, are planets, but they're also circles, and they can be either. I think that's one of the things about abstract art, that Oskar Kokoschka said all art is abstract, but I think he could have just as easily said no art is abstract. And once Einstein's come along with E equals mc2, energy is a form of matter, this can be sort of shapes in the sky, or it can be just squares. They slip in and out of each other, I think. I'm trying to describe these pictures or talk about them, but really, when you paint them, you don't think in terms of words, and so it's very difficult to say anything about them. I'm as mystified by them really as you are, or as anyone is, in terms of words, because you don't think about them when you're doing them in words.
Do you think that these shapes and colors have any reference to the place in which you live?
Well, I think they must do. I remember when Picasso came to England, he said, he looked out at the mist and he said he envied the English painters to be able to paint this mist, and he would love to try and paint this mist. And I think that you find in English painting, or perhaps you find more in English painting, more muted colours than you find, say, in the south of France, where everything is much more brightly lit. And I think that's true. That perhaps, I don't know.
Have you always lived in Cornwall?
No, I lived in Devonshire, which is the next county to Cornwall, when I was young, and then I moved to Cornwall. So I haven't moved far. I've always lived in the west of England. I've always lived in either very small towns or in the country too.
Do you have a coterie of artists with whom you share a dialogue and similar sensibility?
Yes, I think so. In St Ives, where I live, there are a lot of other artists living who have similar ways of working or similar aspirations, and we do see each other, and it's very enjoyable and stimulating to be. This is a picture called In Memoriam. It's a sad picture in a way. It's in memoriam of a friend of mine, and I like that picture very much.
It has a rather monumental quality to it. Is language important to you at all?
Well, language is very important to me, but not with painting. I love reading and I love language, but it's not important to me when I'm painting. I don't think at all in terms of words.
I've noticed that the canvases and the collages have titles.
Yes.
And I wondered whether these titles were significant in any way.
Not really. They're just ways of defining things, rather the way you give titles to cats or children, so that you can distinguish one from the other. Not really.
Do you have a preference for the way in which you express yourself, whether it's through the use of paint on a two-dimensional surface or or the concerns with weaving, or the direct, movement with metal?
Well, when I was young, I earned my living working for sculptors, and I very much liked working for sculptors because I like the slow rhythm of their work. But I find it difficult to think in 3 dimensions. I've tried, and I keep trying in a way, but I don't think I'm any good at it. And painting is in a way too fast for me, although it takes me a long time to paint these pictures. I have to leave them and think about them and go back to them. But weaving is a form of painting in a sense, but it's a slow form of painting, and I think that's one of the reasons I took it up, because it's so slow.
Do you...
Painting is very fast. Nowadays we don't have to mix, we don't have to grind our own colours, we don't have to do any of the craft side of painting anymore. It's too fast.
Do you plan your work? Do you sketch? Do you sketch your ideas? Or
I plan my work, I sketch, I do all these things, and none of it does any good. And when you start off, you're faced with a bare canvas, you haven't got an idea in your head, you don't know what the hell is going to happen. And luckily, occasionally something does.
do you ever change during the midst of a
This
picture?
particular picture, I think those 2 diabolo shapes have been about 20 different colours, yes. Now this is one of the rugs now. Now these rugs are woven on upright looms. It's the tapestry technique of weaving, so that you can weave shapes into the rug. You don't have, it's not like a tartan, say, you know what I mean? And I have big upright square looms so that I can see the whole thing as it's going, and really and truly they're sort of paintings in wool. But I like to think of them as rugs, and I like to think that people will walk on them.
Do you have people helping you in your workshop?
Yes, a bit. For many years, Brian Ilsley and myself worked together at the jewellery, and we were partners. And we split up about 5 years ago, and it was nice then to be on one's own. But now I have 2 helpers who come in 1 day or 2 days a week, depending how busy I am. But they mainly help with the weaving. It's rather nice to get company occasionally. It is a lonely business.
Do you have assistants also in the metal shop?
They help there too, yeah. And they haven't been trained. I don't like getting people who've been trained, because I was never trained really. I picked it up from books.
You never went to school?
I went to school.
Yes. Well, I mean, you never went to art school.
I went to art school,
yes.
I went to a very strange little art school called the Anglo-French Art School, which ran out of money while I was there and closed. But we weren't taught much. We just let them learn to get on with it. But I'd never been taught to weave, you see, except from books.
What moved you toward the notion of using, or the desire to use wool?
I remember when I was quite young doing lots of little watercolours of rugs and not knowing how to turn them into rugs. And I think, it sounds stupid, but when I was in my 40s, I suddenly found a book in the library on Navajo weaving and saw, this is the way, this is the sort of shapes I want to do, this is the way I want to work. And I got a book on how to weave in the Navajo style, and that started me off really. This is hand-dyed wool here, you see, between the triangles, and you can see the sort of irregularities in it, which gives it a little bit more jizz.
What is the source of your wool?
Mainly Wales, mainly. Also some from Africa.
I see.
There's a gentleman outside.
You said that you didn't study art and that the art came from your reading. What were the main sources that you can consciously think about? Who were the artists that really...
I studied art really by studying, going to the museums, looking at the artists' pictures. I think
That's what Matisse said, 1 foot in the world.
Did he?
And 1 in the museum,
Absolutely.
yes.
He's quite right.
Right.
The main foot, I think the biggest foot is in the museum.
But who were the artists that you found most sympathetic toward?
Gosh, all of them. I mean, I really had no favourites. Well, I had favourites, but they changed every week. And it was only when I got older that I began to, so to speak, cut down, if you like, on those influences, because you've got to follow your own path. And you've got to be, I think, a little bit bloody-minded when you get old and wear blinkers, because otherwise you never get anywhere. But when you're young, it's lovely to look at everything.
One of the remarkable things about your metal pieces is the sense of intimacy between the material and the maker.
Yes.
One can feel that, and I would like to have you comment on that aspect of your craft.
I don't know how to. You mean, there's sort of wobbliness about them.
Well, no, the idea that you don't seem to use all the diversity of machines that are available.
Yes.
That you can.
Well, I do like to. Well, because I suppose I think partly because I'm not trained as a jeweler, and I like to work as simply as possible. I find as I get older, I use less and less tools, and I think if one can do something very simply, and it comes off for some reason, to me anyway, it seems better than if and also it has more flavour than if you do it in a more complicated way. I'm always striving for simplicity, but I think you've got to be careful because you can be striving for boredom. And I don't think it's necessarily a thing that everyone should strive for, but it suits me. If you think of the cathedrals, they're not striving for simplicity, and they're beautiful works of art. And Joyce wasn't striving for simplicity. It was through an enormous pile of little tiny details that he got his grand design. But very simple shapes and ideas suit me, and I try and make them shout. What was it said? What he was looking for in art was the shout of life. And I thought that was a lovely phrase.
Who said that?
I don't remember.
The shout?
The shout of life.
Of love.
I think that that's what one looks for, not an abstract picture or a cubist picture or this or that, but this strange quality in a work that somehow makes it talk to you, don't you think?
Well, I do think that. I do agree with you.
One's got it in one's work, you can but try. Now, these are little silver brooches, but really and truly, I mean, they're little paintings, aren't they, or little reliefs. I haven't been doing these long, actually, but I do find them great fun.
I agree that they are really little paintings, and I think the concept of having them, in the same atmosphere with your rugs and with your watercolors and gouaches and oil paintings gives one a greater knowledge of the artist and of you.
Wow.
It brings that thread, together. I often wondered about the stones which you use and the pebbles. Do you find them along the beach? I
find some of them along the beach. I find that if you cut a piece of granite and polish it, it has its own beauty. And but I also think that lapis lazuli, which is very, very expensive, has its own beauty. And gold has its own beauty. What you've got to try and do is, if you're working with lapis lazuli or if you're working with gold, this is a little gold brooch, is to try and forget that it's very valuable and treat it as if it were a piece of granite or a piece of tin, and that's very difficult.
But then in the same time, you take a piece of granite or a piece of tin and you give it the same quality that you give to gold, and you make it precious by the way in which your hand has modeled it.
That's right. It's not the material in itself, which is truly precious as a work of art. It's what you make of it.
Right.
It's a great shame gold is so expensive. because if gold were cheap, you could make, it's the ideal material, I think, to make jewellery with. One envies the old Peruvian Aztecs and Incas, their gold.
Do you have any feelings about whether you're known as an artist or as a craftsman?
Well, I think of myself as a craftsman, certainly, but then I think art is a craft, or painting is a craft. But I don't think of myself as a jeweler or a weaver or a painter. I think of them all really as one and the same. Well, again, as I say, when you're working, you're not thinking in these words, you're just working.
Mm-hmm.
And these sort of shapes appearing, the pictures in the rugs or whatever.
Yes.
Well, there we are, Helen.
Yes, well, well, I'd like to thank you very much for being here and for sharing
Very nice to be.
your ideas with us and your concerns.
So,
Would you like to
let's hope.
please comment on this piece before we...
All I can say is let's hope people like it.